Jacaerys Velaryon, Prince of Dragonstone, died earlier in Season 3, but there were mysteries about him that don't really have an answer. For one, who was Jacaerys' father? But another question revolves around how Baela Targaryen wished to marry Jace at once, but Jace never wished to marry. Why is that? Hi guys, Forgotten Wolf here, and today I will be exploring the other side of Jacaerys' mission to the north and the parts that the show never showed us on screen. With that out of the way, let's begin. The court fool Mushroom, who was at Dragonstone, alleges that Jacaerys Velaryon returned from his trip to the Vale in the north a man. Mushroom goes into great detail about Jace's trip to the north. Mushroom tells us that when Jace got to Winterfell, he fell deeply in love with a girl named Sarah Snow, who was the bastard half-sister of Lord Cregan Stark. Mushroom tells us that Jacaerys was so smitten with her that Jacaerys actually slept with Sarah Snow. Now, Cregan Stark was obviously furious with Jacaerys for sleeping with his sister, despite only being a guest at Winterfell. However, we learn from Mushroom's testimonies that Jacaerys actually married Sarah Snow after sleeping with her. This explains the question I asked at the beginning. Why does Jace refuse to marry Baela, or rather delay for so long? The answer, according to Mushroom, is that Prince Jacaerys had already secretly married another. However, this raises two further questions. Why did Jace marry Sarah after they slept together? And why do the other sources never mention Sarah Snow? To answer the first question, in my eyes, if Jace did sleep with Sarah Snow, it was very likely in grief for the death of his brother, Prince Lucerys, as in the books, Jace was at Winterfell when he heard the news of Luke's death and at the Wall in the show. When Jace realized what he'd done, he likely married Sarah Snow to protect her honor over his own, as if he didn't have to have a choice, as the Starks in the North wouldn't support his mother Rhaenyra if he didn't marry her after sleeping with her. Although I would say Jace probably married her because he needed to protect her honor, very similar to what happened to Robb Stark in the books and show. Now, other sources, and sorry for the notification, other sources of what happened during the Dance of the Dragons were Grand Maester Munkun and Septon Eustace. Munkun doesn't mention Sarah Snow, and I'll get onto that in a little bit, but first I should talk about what Septon Eustace says. Now, Septon Eustace is a huge Green supporter and Aegon loyalist, as we see in House of the Dragon. Eustace, in his telling of events, questions if Sarah Snow even existed, and pointing out that Jacaerys had been betrothed to Baela for so long, and it would make zero sense for Jacaerys to break such a crucial betrothal for the Blacks. However, to me, I take what Eustace says in two ways here. Eustace is a Green supporter, so it's extremely easy for him to say, yes, Jacaerys did marry a northern bastard, and he shouldn't inherit the Iron Throne. But as that helps the Greens' case even further and makes allies less likely to support Rhaenyra, as she can't even control her own sons from living and breaking oaths. However, Eustace doesn't. He refutes the claim by Mushroom and actually defends the Blacks for once, which means that very likely Prince Jacaerys did not marry a northern bastard girl, but I do believe that Jacaerys did sleep with Sarah Snow, or rather, it's possible, as Eustace goes on to say that Jace sleeping with Sarah Snow is common for princes to do, which implies sort of, yes, that Sarah Snow did end up existing, and something did happen between her and Jace, but definitely not marriage. Even from a logical standpoint, if Jace married Sarah Snow, that means the Velaryons have zero reason to support Rhaenyra, as Luke is dead, and it would make both Baela and Rhaena free to marry, on top of Baela being robbed of the chance to become a queen, thanks to Jacaerys' actions. Now I want to get on to what Grand Maester Munkun says, which is absolutely nothing. Munkun is commonly believed to be the truest source, as he isn't biased to any sides in the Dance of the Dragons, which means what he says is very likely the truth. Munkun claims that when Jace went to Winterfell, he became practically brothers with Lord Cregan Stark. It was easy for Jace to make an agreement with the Lord of Winterfell, and their agreement is known as the Pact of Ice and Fire. In this agreement, Jace promised that when he married Baela Targaryen, he would probably have a daughter, which would be sent to Winterfell at age 7 and promised to Cregan's 1-year-old son Rickon. And at age 7, like I said, Jace's daughter would be fostered at Winterfell. The North, in the Dance of the Dragons, really liked Jace and still fought for Rhaenyra long after Jace and Rhaenyra's death. If Jace came in and slept with a bastard sister of the Lord of Winterfell, that would definitely turn the North away from Rhaenyra in my eyes. So, if Jace didn't sleep or marry Sarah Snow, what happened between the two of them? Because clearly something happened, as I think she does exist as Mushroom says she does, and Eustace says there something happened in Winterfell. And in my eyes, what I see two potential scenarios to what happened here. Either A, Jacaerys won the favor of Sarah Snow when he trained in the yard with Lord Cregan Stark, as that is confirmed to have happened where he trained with Cregan. Kind of like how Daemon wins Rhaenyra's favor in episode 1 of House of the Dragon. Or B, Sarah Snow was attracted to Jacaerys and she either admitted her feelings to him, or he noticed her feelings but chose to ignore her, rather focusing on his mission with the Lord of Winterfell, Cregan Stark. However, if I had to pick any, I think scenario A is more likely, as it establishes there's no romantic connection. And I would also like to say that just because it's out of character for Jacaerys to sleep and marry someone that's not Baela, it's not unheard of from George R. R. Martin, as we see that exact same thing happen to Robb Stark. He is very honorable and doesn't break his honor once throughout a majority of the first two books, and season 1 and most of season 2 in the show. However, when Winterfell is captured and Robb's younger brothers are allegedly killed, he sleeps with Talisa in the show and Jane Westerling in the books, which grief can make you do irrational things that hurt you in the long run. That does sound like something that would have happened to Jace after he heard of Luke's death. I would have loved for House of the Dragon to include this flip side of Jace's trip to the North, as it shows that not everyone is perfect. As Jacaerys, sure, he has flaws as a character, thinking he is a bastard, but letting that go to him frequently. But he's clearly the best heir to the ruling monarch for either team. As compared to Aemond and Team Greens, Jacaerys is clearly more sane. If we see Jacaerys turning a blind eye to a girl who loves him and picking duty over maybe comfort, or sleeping with someone who, when he is a guest, that makes you question if anyone should really inherit the Iron Throne. And the first part, Jacaerys just sounds like the perfect character there, but in B, it shows that everyone has flaws, no one's perfect, and really no one should take the Iron Throne. In conclusion, while it's certainly possible that Jacaerys Velaryon married Sarah Snow, I don't think it happened, as Grand Maester Munkin would have certainly mentioned the marriage in his telling, or Jace sleeping with her at all, as Daemon allegedly slept with Nettles, and that was mentioned by Grand Maester Munkin. However, I do believe that Sarah Snow existed, and there was something there, it just wasn't as extreme as what Mushroom said. And either way, whether Jacaerys married or not, it didn't matter, as Jacaerys Velaryon would be killed at the Battle of the Gullet in 130 AC. That does it for me, and with House of the Dragon Season 3's end soon, I need to make a video answering the question, was House of the Dragon Season 3 good? But until then, bye!